Imagine living in a city where no desire was forbidden, where wealth opened doors to every kind of pleasure, and where parties went on endlessly, with people not caring about the consequences the next day. This was the scenario in Sodom and Gomorrah, a place seemingly prosperous and filled with lust, yet hiding a dark and cruel face. Behind the ostentatious palaces and grand temples, violence, betrayal, and perverse practices reigned, defying any notion of morality. Women were nothing more than commodities. Children were used in macabre ceremonies, and the less fortunate were abandoned to their fate on the streets without any compassion. All this depravity continued until a catastrophic event brought everything to an end in flames. But what really happened in those places? What was the day-to-day life like in a society where right and wrong virtually did not exist? And what was the final straw that led to the city's complete destruction? In today's episode, you will uncover the truth behind Sodom and Gomorrah, a story that mixes unbridled lust, limitless power, and inevitable judgment. Prepare to dive into a past filled with excesses and cruelties, serving as a warning even today. Upon approaching Sodom and Gomorrah, the first impression was that of bustling, prosperous cities. A stroll down the streets revealed stalls crowded with spices, precious metals, and items from distant lands. The aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted meats filled the air as servants went about carrying jars of oil and expensive wines. Their strategic location near the Dead Sea and the fertile lands around ensured abundant harvests of wheat, barley, and fruits, attracting merchants from as far away as Egypt and Mesopotamia. With money flowing freely, men in luxurious robes flaunted their status by erecting houses built from polished stones and decorated with the finest fabrics. For the wealthiest, the parties were endless, filled with banquets and music, where the supply of food and drink seemed infinite. Yet behind this glitter lay a dark side. Social inequality was glaringly obvious. While a few flaunted unimaginable riches, many suffered in misery without any assistance. The local culture exalted power and profit, while despising empathy and kindness. Tampered scales and markets, abusive prices, and fraud were part of everyday business. Those who couldn't settle their debts risked being sold as slaves, and the laws favored only the richest. The apparent advanced civilization of Sodom and Gomorrah also featured grand temples where priests performed rituals for pagan gods. Caravans arriving from all corners of the known world contributed to the fame of these cities as centers of commerce and influence. Yet a closer look revealed that greed and corruption blended with ostentation, eroding the social fabric. Those enjoying wealth believed they were above any punishment, as if judgment would never catch up with them. But fate was already sealed, and a tragic end began to take shape on the horizon. Stunning architecture could be seen at every turn in Sodom. Grand palaces, imposing mansions, and wide plazas, all designed to impress. The residences of the wealthy were constructed from finely worked stones, with majestic columns and inner courtyards adorned with sculptures and mosaics. By day, the markets were bustling. Stalls displayed sparkling jewels, exotic spices, and fabrics from distant lands. There were even Egyptian perfumes and hand-embroidered carpets, products that lent the city a cosmopolitan air. However, when night fell, those very plazas transformed into stages for exuberant parties and pagan ceremonies, brimming with music, provocative dances, and sacrifices that would have scandalized other civilizations of the time. Despite all the splendor, life for those outside the elite was brutal. Poor neighborhoods emerged in the most remote corners, with makeshift housing, dirty, unlit streets, and virtually no security. In such environments, crimes and assaults occurred with impunity. Judges and local leaders preferred to protect those who paid them bribes, further reinforcing injustice. In Sodom, acts of kindness were seen as foolishness and rarely earned admiration. Survival depended on strength, influence, or wealth. In the richer districts, monumental temples rose in honor of pagan gods, many associated with fertility and pleasure. The priests wielded enormous political and economic power, receiving generous offerings and conducting rituals that mixed religion with immoral practices. These gatherings often involved opulent parties, where the pursuit of ecstasy was paramount. Although some residents believed these rituals brought prosperity, in practice, they reinforced the city's moral decay. Another striking characteristic of Sodom was the absence of a strong army. Confident in their amassed wealth and natural defenses, the rulers neglected military protection, convinced that no enemy would dare threaten them. This presumption manifested in daily life. The powerful acted as if they could buy everything, including immunity for their wrongdoings. Family relationships grew increasingly cold, and bonds, when they existed, were easily broken by betrayals and power struggles. If life was already harsh for the poorest inhabitants, for foreigners arriving without resources, the situation bordered on despair. In many ancient cultures, hospitality was a sacred duty. Yet in Sodom, the opposite prevailed. Travelers without possessions were often humiliated, attacked, or even killed. This callousness extended to all human relationships. Brothers betrayed brothers, and children abandoned their parents without remorse. The value of compassion had been replaced by an obsession with satisfying immediate desires. Sodom and Gomorrah were corrupted to their very core. Unbridled pride contaminated every layer of society, and all signs pointed to a catastrophic end being only a matter of time. For many, life in Sodom was an endless festival of pleasures, yet the lack of love and empathy left the city on the brink of collapse. After all, when a nation is built on selfishness, ruin comes swiftly. The day of destruction began like any other. Radiant sun, bustling markets, and temples ready for another round of rituals. However, no one imagined that those would be the last hours of celebration and ostentation. The arrogance of Sodom would finally reach its limit, proving that no wealth can shield a society that ignores compassion. Hubris destroyed Sodom, but humility brings us closer to God. If you believe in this, write in the comments, "God restores my life." The night before, something very strange occurred in Sodom. Two strangers arrived in the city, and soon news spread that violent men planned to attack them. What almost no one knew was that these two travelers were, in fact, angels sent to destroy the city. When the house where they stayed was surrounded, the inhabitants demanded they be handed over, once again revealing the cruelty that reigned there. At that moment, a light so intense shone that it blinded the attackers, signaling that the end of Sodom was near. At dawn, the angels warned Lot, one of the few just men in the entire region. It was time to leave with his family and not look back. As hard as it was to leave everything behind, Lot had no choice. While he and his relatives hurriedly departed, most of the inhabitants continued their normal routine, completely unaware of the impending tragedy. Then the sky began to darken, the air grew heavy, and without any warning, the first bolt of fire fell from the heavens. In moments, flames and sulfur consumed entire streets, toppling the most luxurious constructions and reducing the temples to ashes. Men and women ran in panic, seeking shelter that simply did not exist. Regardless of social class, all faced the same terrible fate. The smoke and heat rendered the area uninhabitable, and scenes of despair spread everywhere with no hope of salvation. As they fled, Lot and his family remembered the warning, "Do not look back." However, Lot's wife could not resist her curiosity and paused to observe the destruction. In that very instant, she turned into a pillar of salt, punished for her inability to leave the city behind. Thus, Sodom and Gomorrah, once known for their wealth and endless revelry, were transformed into a scene of smoldering ruins, permeated by the bitter smell of sulfur. In the end, the city that prided itself on its ostentation vanished in a single day, leaving behind only a lesson that resonates to this day. No nation, however powerful or rich, can survive when it ignores compassion and justice. If this story has made you reflect, leave your like now and consider how our choices can have lasting consequences. And if you think you've seen it all, know that betrayal is also a theme present in the Bible, involving women who were unfaithful to their husbands. Want to know what happened to them and the lessons we can learn? Click on our channel now and discover these stories. See you next time.